all, and welcome on back to the old Mountain Man channel. Today I'm going to be breaking down and recapping everything that happens in the 10th episode of Sons of Appalachia. So yeah, it was a pretty good episode. It was all about the hunt for the Ashman on Huckleberry's actual childhood home property, which was kind of cool. It's a shame they never actually explored the house at all, but he did mention it and they kind of walked past it, but we didn't really get to see much of it, unfortunately, but it was still a fine episode. So let's begin with where it all starts off. An old farmer contacted Huckleberry from the holler and said that he knew all about this older Bigfoot that lives around where he lives. And he was kind of concerned, of course, because there was actually one night when he was in his barn and he ended up getting trapped in there. And there was actually a smaller Bigfoot that was trying to kind of break into the barn. So he knows there's an older Bigfoot there and a younger one. So there's two Bigfoots in that area. And that area just so happens to be the same area, the actual property where Huckleberry grew up on. His old childhood home sits on the property. It's been long since abandoned. Nobody lives there anymore. But the farmer lives close by and he's been seeing all this action firsthand. So they believe that the Bigfoots here, they gotta be, of the Ashman clan, of course. The senior Ashman and the Ash boy, I guess, because, the one is a juvenile Bigfoot, or at least on the younger side. But the other one seems to be pretty old, and, he just kind of wants to stay in this area, of course. But now this younger Bigfoot's kind of trying to push him out of the area. He kind of wants to take over the whole territory. And they're just kind of having a big old territorial brawl, of course. So Huckleberry's plan is to try to get that younger Bigfoot out of the area so that the older Bigfoot can just kind of live out the rest of his days there. And yeah, they head out on into the woods, switch over to IR, and they trek through the mud because it had just rained like the night before, I think. So pretty recently it rained, and yeah, everything's just kind of all like still kind of dewy and wet. But, that's kind of good weather actually for going monster hunting, because all the monsters will think that you're probably not going to be out there. A lot of animals kind of come out after a big old storm or after it rains because they think that people won't be out there. So, yeah, cryptids are obviously no different. So they know the ways of the woods, so they're going to be out there all the more. And, well, let me just tell you, they are out there, of course. If you haven't seen the episode, then, what the hell are you doing? Go watch the episode. But yeah, they definitely hear some stuff out there in the woods on this night. Now they go past Huckleberry's old childhood home, but they don't really show it all that much. I was kind of surprised. I thought that they were going to go in it and just kind of see what's kind of become of it, but they didn't do anything like that. It's been long since abandoned, I think, right? They never really said that, but it has to be, right? There's nobody living there. Although maybe that's why they didn't show it. Maybe there was someone living there. They didn't really explain themselves all that well. That was one of the things I didn't care for about this episode. Huckleberry was just kind of telling us stuff in the beginning, but he was talking so softly, I could barely understand what he was saying. And I don't even think he mentioned once that they're actually on, his childhood home property. I think somebody just commented that in the comments, and I realized, oh yeah, that's why he keeps referring to it. Like, oh, I grew up here, and, I did that when I was younger, and I remember this, but he never actually says, at least I'll have to go back and watch it, but I swear he doesn't say once that I grew up on this property. I don't think he says it, but let me know down below in the comments. I've already seen the episode a couple times, but he was very hard to understand. Is it just me, or did I find him a little bit hard to understand in this episode at the beginning? I don't know, maybe the team was tired. It was late at night. Anyways, he actually says that at one point there was a huge pile of deer fur kind of close by the house, but there was no deer carcass to be found anywhere. And Huckleberry was just exploring this area, I think a few days or weeks before this hunt. So, he'd been there pretty recently. I don't know what he was doing there, just kind of scouting the area, I think. There are big cats in the area, so it could have just been a big cat that skinned a deer, I'm not really sure. And then, took the body off. But there was also apparently a huge Bigfoot nest inside of Huckleberry's old childhood home. Huckleberry actually makes some calls very randomly, because while Bill's talking, he's kind of questioning everything, and he's like, well, if there's two Bigfoots out here, then why the hell aren't we seeing any signs? And Huckleberry's like, that's enough out of you, Bill. He just interrupts him, and he just starts doing Bigfoot calls. And Buck does say that he sees an eye shine, but the cameraman, which I think is Lee, or Jeff Waldridge, I don't know, one of them, they didn't bother to show us until like a minute after they, initially saw the eye shine. So we don't get to see the eye shine. At least I couldn't see it. So I don't know. I found that kind of strange. But Buck, he wants Wild Bill to use the thermal, which makes sense, right? But Wild Bill lost the battery. So yeah, just a hard episode to follow. Like, why wasn't that, charged up before they went out there? But whatever. Like, you're going to need the old thermal. So I think that should have been charged up. But I don't know. That's just me thinking ahead. They actually say that they saw something bust through the brush. And as they continue off into the woods, Jeff Waldridge actually says, I think I see something back here. But they didn't really go back to look for it, so they're seeing things left and right, but it's not really coming up on camera. So whether, they actually were getting stalked by a Bigfoot or Bigfoots, I guess, then, well, who really knows? But I don't know. We'll believe that. Anyways, yeah, Buckaroo ends up finding an actual Bigfoot nest, but not inside Huckleberry's old house, but instead it's just kind of, in the brush. And there's all these different paths leading up to it, and each path is about 4 feet wide. So, that's a big creature going on in to this nest. And sure, yeah, it could have been from a bear, but I don't know. I think that it was probably from one of those two Bigfoots, unless they're, snuggling up together at night, although I find that hard to believe since they seem to hate each other so much. And yeah, either way, huge nest, and it's pretty darn cool that we get to see it so close on camera. I mean, that's awesome. It's not every day you get to see a giant Bigfoot nest like this. Anyways, as the team keeps moving on into the woods, they leave the nest alone. They keep hearing stuff, and they really do start hearing sounds from these two Bigfoots. Now, whether it's actually the Bigfoots or something else, I have a theory that we'll talk about later on. Well, I don't know, but, as far as the episode's telling us, it is the Bigfoots making the sounds, and they're hearing these sounds left and right. Sometimes it'll be more of like a roar, but nothing really sounded all that, like, I don't know, real to me. They almost sounded like, they were just pressing different sounds on a toy dinosaur or something, and, it just kept making sounds. You know what I mean? That's what it sounded like to me. It did not sound like real Bigfoots making these sounds, because a lot of the sounds were just repeated. Like, they sounded the exact same as, a sound that we heard just a few sounds before, like a lot of them did kind of repeat themselves. So whatever, whether they're, actual Bigfoots roaring and screaming, either way, it was still a fun episode. But I'm just saying, yeah, the funny thing is, Buckaroo is acting like these sounds are like barely hearable. He's saying like, wait, did you hear that? Did you hear that? But like, yeah, we heard it. Like, it's louder than the team members talking. Like, it's much louder than Huckleberry was at the beginning of this episode. So I'm just not really understanding why they're acting like they could barely hear them if, they're like very close. Clearly, they're making these sounds. It's not like they're a million miles away. They're very close making all these roaring, grunting sounds. But yeah, whatever. That was just a little thing I noticed. And many other people noticed too because they commented. But either way, these Bigfoots, they are definitely angry. And the team thinks that maybe if they travel back out, that the younger Bigfoot will actually kind of follow them. So they start kind of like backtracking. They're hoping that this younger Bigfoot will follow them right on out of the older Bigfoot's territory. I don't really think that'll work, but you know what? It kind of does, but not really. Well, Bill actually thought that he was trying to bluff charge him, so I don't know if he was or not, but yeah, I'm actually not even 100% sure what bluff charging means, but I'm sure somebody will let me know in the comments. They end up passing this other old building, though, presumably just like an old shed of some sort, I guess, and they hear a loud bang sound that it almost sounded like it was coming from inside of it, or maybe from the back side of it. They just couldn't see what was making the sound, but it was probably one of those Bigfoots, either inside of it or behind it. Loud bang sound. And then the sounds, like the roaring and grunting and stuff, like it all kept getting closer and louder and clearer too. But the trees were shaking, they start even throwing stuff at the team eventually. But they move upwards so that they can kind of, see things a little bit better and, be on the higher ground. But once they're up there, they just hear more sounds than ever. All these grunts and growls. And Huckleberry states that if anything were to come up there, then it'd have to climb up a 12-foot wall. Unless, Buck says, it was already within 12 feet. So yeah, I don't know. It definitely would have had to have been a huge creature to come up there to try to get them. Because, they would have had to climb a 12-foot wall. And even a Bigfoot, can't stand up and be 12 feet. That's just completely unrealistic. But something ends up hitting the side of this old camper that was out there in the woods, just kind of left abandoned to rot. And Huckleberry's like, you know what? Let's all get behind it. And he urges the team, like he means it. He's like, get behind the camper, get behind the camper. Although I'm not exactly sure why, because whatever, just hit it was clearly still right there. But anyways, they get behind the camper and they end up finding claw marks on the camper. And the grandpa Bigfoot, obviously, he doesn't know that, they're on his team. So he's the one that's kind of doing all the growling and stuff right here, they think. I mean, you can't really tell which one's which, but they seem to think that. And the little one's probably close by. And they're both kind of all upset. And it sounds almost like they're having a big old brawl just maybe in front of the camper. I don't know. Because Wild Bill couldn't see them fighting. But, they're hearing things. Obviously, the Bigfoots are throwing stuff at them. And they're just trying to get them the hell out of there, of course. Buckaroo ends up using this as an opportunity to flee back to his truck, though, and the whole team joins him. And Buck states that the hunt is not over. They will come back to the area to push the younger Bigfoot out of the area, but who knows when? Probably on the next episode, but I'm not sure. So that's it for the Bigfoot hunt portion of the episode. But then it shows this video that was sent to the SOA team's P.O. box from the 13th Dominion. And they state that Huckleberry completed one of their demands by telling a secret. Bill's little accident and the Ridge Ripper incident were to show the team that they don't play games. They're not messing around out there. And they say that Bill will pay for every stitch that he gave to the 13th Dominion team that night. Remember when he actually, I think, stabbed one of the team members? So it's an eye for an eye. Now, apparently, according to them, they could wipe out SOA in an instant, but they don't. And the key in the briefcase that they gave to them a few episodes ago will be very, very important in the future. So they do urge the team to keep it safe. The leader also says that Huckleberry was a key part in the founding fathers of the 13th Dominion. And he's also actually one of the original 13, the guy that, is always talking in these videos. Presumably the leader, but I don't really know. And then he says apparently that one night in the mountains, while after a creature Huckleberry has never gone after again, he saved several of their men back in the day. And this creature is one that many don't know about and is the reason for why people go missing in the mountains all the damn time. They want Huckleberry, or as they call him in this video, Big Joe, to do one last mission for them, no strings attached. He must be alone, and no other team members can come with him. And if in their next video or episode of SOA, that if they actually say, give an answer and say if Huckleberry's going to or not follow through with this, then they'll send further instructions if Huckleberry says he'll do it. But if not, then I don't think that'll be too good for the old SOA team. If he does this, though, apparently they will call it a truce. That would be great if, they weren't at battle with each other anymore, the SOA team and the 13th Dominion, but I just find that hard to believe. I think they're probably trying to trick them again, but who knows. They ended off with saying one last thing. The past is a closed door, the present is an open one, the future is an approaching one. Follow the red hand. So yeah, that damn red hand again, back again. We'll see if it comes into play in the next episode at all. Maybe that's what Huckleberry will have to do. He'll have to go on some mission, go after the red hand, whatever the hell that is. I'm not really sure, but we'll see. Hopefully on a future episode of SOA. Hopefully episode 11. So yeah, that was the episode, It wasn't all that long, and it took a while to get going. But once they got out into the woods and they're looking for the Ashmen, it was fun. I enjoy just the Bigfoot hunts, just the simple stuff like that. It's not some mind controlling Sasquatch or nothing like that. None of the more unbelievable stuff. It was just a simple old Bigfoot grandpa and Bigfoot baby, and they're out there and they're fighting for territory. That part about the episode, awesome. I loved all that. But once they got into the Bigfoots making noises, it just really took me out of it, because I'm sorry all, but I can't believe that those were real Bigfoot sounds.
Yeah, what?
I don't know. They just, I don't know about those. I think, you know what it is, guys? I think, what if somebody had this theory in the comments, and I was thinking more about it the last day or so, and I'm like, I think that could definitely be the case. What if it was the 13th Dominion playing sounds like through a megaphone or something in the woods? They're just playing all these Bigfoot sounds on their phone, you know? What if that's the case? I don't know. I'm not going to take credit for the theory because there's somebody else. But whoever it was that said that, hoorah to you if that ends up being true. Imagine that. That would be pretty darn cool. And that'll be a great plot point for the next episode, episode 11, when the team goes back after the old Ashman, but not the grandpa Ashman, the baby Ashman, because they want to get him on out of that territory and let the grandpa Ashman just be alone out there in the woods, and let him do whatever Bigfoot grandpa thinks he likes to do. I don't know. Anyways, thank y'all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see y'all next time on the old Mountain Man. Hoorah! We're gonna catch some monsters.